I'd like to welcome everyone to Jack Kimbrough's senior speech. I'd like to begin by welcoming some special guests who are visiting us today for this event. Jack's mother, Andy, and his father, Dr. Jamie Kimbrough, of course his brother, Noah, and his sister, Brindley, and his grandmother, Judy Kimbrough, and attending virtually is his girlfriend, Hannah. I'd like to thank you all for coming. I had the honor of being Jack's math teacher for Algebra 2 a few years ago, but I've been his advisor for 3 years now. In class, Jack is a very attentive and thoughtful student who, as he says, very quietly participated, but has a fantastic wit and humor about him. He has worked at the lower school's extended day program for several years now, and he's known to be the least favorite comedian on the staff. Jack is very active with musical theater workshops and is also a Sunday school assistant teacher. He also has a social media presence in which he creates and posts custom collectibles. He's also a huge fan of early morning visits to the gym. The topic of his speech today is living like fiction. Please welcome Jack Kimbrough.
Thank you, Mr. Gallagher. You've been an inordinately forgiving advisor, despite only ever seeing me during fire drills. Hello, everybody. Today I'm going to talk about a topic everybody enjoys. Fiction is an exclusively human tool that has helped synthesize what it means to be a person living on Earth. These lessons in humanity are most often demonstrated through characters. They serve as vessels to experience the storyteller's world as well as the real one. I want to show you all how a person can be inspired by a fictional character and to propose to you my theory that the characters who inspire us as children can influence our developing personality. Of course, we must begin with a story. There was once a baby boy who, from the earliest age he can remember, wanted to be Lightning McQueen from Pixar's Cars. As I've been told, some of his first words were quotes from the movie. The boy was much like the racer, hot-headed, confident, and certainly did not like to be bossed around. As McQueen was taught by the people of Radiator Springs that racing isn't everything and to think more of others, the boy grows up and is taught to be more considerate, developing in a similar way to the race car. Major plot twist, that boy was mean. At least, as my parents described me. When I was young and interacting with fiction on a very surface level, I found the cool characters to be the ones who didn't think twice and were kind of jerks. As my love for stories changed over time, I found myself gravitating more to the wise, intellectual characters. As opposed to Lightning McQueen, I see more of his mentor Doc in my personality. I went from Anakin Skywalker to Obi-Wan Kenobi. The big lesson I derived from this change is to just chill out, to be patient and to act like a grown-up. While I don't like to psychoanalyze people to explain the past, a rift had formed between me and my peers as this change occurred. I became a socially awkward dweeb. And now that you've seen these pictures, please continue to direct your attention at the screen. Okay. So I was clearly influenced by the fiction and stories I consumed in a very unconscious way. And so, as I went through the even more socially awkward middle school stage, I resorted completely to fiction, as opposed to going out and making friends. While that fact makes me cringe, in hindsight, the amount of stories I consumed at that age helped who I became today immensely. For example, as some of you are well aware from having to look down at me for most of the time, I'm a pretty short dude. I tried to deny this fact for most of middle school because it was a source of shame. And it was about that time I realized I wasn't getting any taller. I watched Attack on Titan for the first time. Specifically, the character of Levi Ackerman caught my eye. He's the strongest character in the show and brings down these giants with ease. So when I tell you he was the coolest character I've ever seen, I mean it. The best part, he was the exact same height as me. He's 6'1". Instead of being ashamed of how I looked because of my height, I embraced it. I even adopted the cool and nonchalant attitude for a while, which thankfully passed as middle school angst, even if I looked a little socially stunted. But now, some of you know the reason why I may have been a jerk to you at some point before 9th grade. As I left middle school and transitioned into high school, I started to develop a life. I got more involved in my community, and I made new relationships. I grew to acknowledge the effect that fiction had on me and how much value I put into it. In an effort to use what I thought was a defense tactic as a form of self-improvement, I began to reconcile morals and lessons I learned from fictional characters with the person I was becoming. In doing so, I became a more grounded and secure person. Perhaps the only reason I'm able to look back at the pitfalls of growing up is because I became so secure with how I turned out. And I owe a lot of that to the fictional characters who inspired me. My original plan for the speech was to go on with a few more examples, but then I actually read my guidelines and realized I need a research component. So I begrudgingly did a single Google search, ready to shrug my shoulders and say there was no research. But then I was slapped in the face by the most interesting part of everything I've talked about. It's been backed by research the whole time. This is where Jeff F. Kaufman and Lisa K. Kibbe introduced me to experience taking. Basically, experience taking is when somebody becomes so inspired by a fictional character that they start adopting their emotions, behaviors, and even goals. You may realize at this point that all of my previously described behaviors could fall under experience taking. Now, I'm going to ask you to take a second to reflect on whether or not you have a fictional character that you once saw yourself as. It doesn't matter how old or young you are, just think of one. Now, lock it in, and raise your hand if you loved that character in your early childhood or adolescent years. I can't see you, but if you raised your hand, your desire to be like that fictional character likely coincided with a stage of development where the idea of self-concept, or who you see yourself as, was fluid or uncertain. You're born without the ability to recognize your thoughts and feelings, so the age when you start forming memories for the first time, you're experiencing self-concept. In your adolescent years, your idea of self-concept goes through a more comprehensive stage of development. It's been shown that experience taking is more common in states of lowered self-concept. So, theoretically speaking, experience taking should be demonstrated more in children and adolescents, explaining my development and the role fictional characters played in that. From my experience, when the attitudes of a character I adopted were positively reinforced, I continued to demonstrate them until they became natural personality traits. Kaufman and Kibbe's study explicitly suggests the more stories you consume, the more likely you are to demonstrate experience taking. So, because I'm obsessed with stories, I'm simply a conglomerate of personality traits from characters that nobody called me weird for. And you might be too, to a more normal degree. The aspect of this revelation that captured my attention was the fact that I couldn't find a study that applied experience taking to children, which is likely attributed to the fact that the concept of experience taking is relatively new. I talked with several psychologists who encouraged me to do more research into childhood developmental psychology, as well as examining how neurodivergence would affect my ideas. It's possible that I'm attributing experience taking to what is actually the idea of learning from an example or role model. It's possible that I'm Also demonstrating evidence of Jung's archetypes in a very indirect way. And there's likely a strong correlation between experience taking and the common practice among people on the autism spectrum called mirroring. The study by Kaufman and Kibbe focuses on literature, but I believe from my personal experience that experience taking can be done watching a film as well as reading. I'd like to think there's a place for my ramblings somewhere within all of these established researchers. So as I prepare to go to college and study child psychology, I hope that my fascination for this topic stays with me, so I can do real research into whether or not what I'm rambling about is true. And that's what's so exciting to me about what the exploration of this topic became. What I thought was me just baselessly theorizing based on my own experience was in fact a studied phenomenon. For the first time in my life, I got excited wading through studies for information that confirmed my theory. In a very indirect way, these fictional characters who I modeled myself after taught me to love research, which is an important aspect of the career I wanted to pursue. I'd like to thank my family for being here today and for allowing me to explore all of these stories. I could thank you for a lot of other things, but then I'd be here all week. And I'd like to thank Hannah, my lovely girlfriend, for being here and helping me edit this speech and making it understandable in human language. And I'd also like to thank all of you guys for listening to me ramble and giving me the time of day. I hope you enjoyed listening to me talk as much as I like talking about it. This whole process of constructing my speech was more transformative than I expected. I learned that the magical aspect I had attributed to the power fiction has on people was rooted in truth, and the demystification of fiction's influence thoroughly deepened my love of it and encouraged me to explore it further. I hope I was able to do the same for you, at least a little bit. Or I may be able to shine a light on a lesson you learned from fictional characters, or demonstrated the benefit of showing Cars and Star Wars to infants. Suppose it worked for me. Or maybe I helped to highlight how special the idea of creating fiction is. It's brought our species together since we began to speak, and we pass these stories down to our children, who become more like the characters who inspire them, filling the world with heroes of myth. Thank you all.